Nobody likes a quitter unless you're trying to give up smoking or the Big Bang Theory, in which case I'm pulling for you, buddy. In wrestling, the words "I quit" are forever tied to the match type of the same name, which involves two participants beating each other to bloody pulps until one person gives up. There have been some exceptional I quit matches in WWE over the years, while some have nearly made fans quit watching wrestling entirely. Any match to carry the name I quit is counted here, but we won't be counting similar stipulation matches that went by different names. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and this is every WWE I Quit match ranked from worst to best. Join us. Number 25, Vince McMahon vs. Stephanie McMahon at No Mercy 2003. In 2003, WWE, a publicly traded company, sold a pay-per-view on the promise of seeing a middle-aged man beat the crap out of his own daughter. There's something deeply wrong with all of us for liking wrestling, isn't there? Vince McMahon had become increasingly irritated by his daughter Stephanie's decision-making as SmackDown GM, so did what any respectable father would do in his situation. He challenged her to an I Quit match with her job on the line. At No Mercy, which probably should have been called No Taste instead, the McMahons wrestled, quote-unquote, for the most uncomfortable 10 minutes of all time, as the much larger Vince did not go easy on his opponent, who, need I remind you, was his own daughter. Oh, and to make matters worse, Stephanie's mother Linda was at ringside to watch her beloved princess get beaten up by her husband, who had his mistress Sable in his corner. What is wrong with this family? Morally, this was an abomination, and the wrestling itself wasn't great either. Also, Steph could have won by pinfall or submission, so it didn't even stick to its own brief. This remains one of the strangest, most unsettling WWE matches of all time, regardless of stipulation. Number 24, Bret Hart vs. Bob Backland at WrestleMania 11. The first match to carry the I Quit name is also the only one to have taken place at WrestleMania at time of recording. Bret Hart squared off against Bob Backland at WrestleMania 11 in a rivalry that had been building since Backland beat the Hitman for the world title the previous year. This was supposed to be a test of these two fighters' respective wills, but it turned out more like a second-rate pantomime. With Rowdy Roddy Piper installed as the special guest referee for reasons, Hart and Backland went back and forth trading submissions, and it just wasn't the most exciting thing in the world to watch. Hart managed to trap Backland in his own signature hold, prompting Piper to ask if he was done. Backland's response was to make a noise like he was trying to swallow a mouthful of pennies, but for some reason, Piper called for the bell. A really bland match with a truly odd finish, WrestleMania definitely deserved better. Number 23, Big Show vs. Ryan Taylor on SmackDown. At Cyber Sunday 2008, The Undertaker and The Big Show would compete in a match with a stipulation decided by the fans, either knockout, last man standing, or I Quit. To prepare for every eventuality, Show was put into all three of these matches back-to-back on the October 17th episode of SmackDown. This might sound like quite the challenge, but just look at who he was up against. Show's opponents were all enhancement talent, although one of them would grow up to be one half of the Young Bucks. The man he faced in the I Quit match was Ryan Taylor, who would eventually return to NXT many years later as Tyler Rust. Poor old Ryan got obliterated, barely getting time to appreciate he was in a match on TV before getting trapped in a Cobra Clutch submission hold, and he quit almost immediately, ending this match in just under a minute. To top it all off, the winner of the fan vote at Cyber Sunday was a last man standing match, so this was all for nothing. Number 22, Charlotte Flair vs. Aliyah on SmackDown. Ahead of their I Quit match at WrestleMania Backlash 2022, more on that in a little bit, Charlotte Flair and Ronda Rousey took part in a Beat the Clock I Quit challenge on the April 29th episode of SmackDown. The objective was, of course, to see who could win their match the fastest. Ronda went first and set a very respectable time of 1 minute and 41 seconds, which the Queen needed to beat in order to prove her dominance. Flair's opponent was Aliyah, who had absolutely nothing to do with this storyline and was just there to get jobbed out. Weirdly though, she was booked to look quite strong against the SmackDown Women's Champion, getting the upper hand on her a few times. While Charlotte was eventually able to slap on a figure eight, her opponent held on until Ronda's time expired. Flair had lost the challenge, but I guess this match ended in a draw? Who knows? So did Aliyah at least get a push off the the back of looking so resilient against a big star? You know full well she didn't. Number 21, Ronda Rousey versus Shotsy on SmackDown. The other half of the Beat the Clock challenge took place immediately before the match we just mentioned, with the baddest woman on the planet going head-to-head with Shotsy. The former Miss Blackheart spent most of the early stages of the match running away in an attempt to get more seconds on the clock. I mean, by that logic, why didn't she just run to the back and then hop in her rental car? However, because this is wrestling and not Looney Tunes, Shotsy was eventually caught by Rousey, who made quick work of her. She delivered a couple of big blows before smoothly transitioning into an ankle lock, which made the green-haired gal give up within a matter of seconds. This half of the challenge gets points because, unlike the other one, it actually had a finish. Number 20, John Cena versus The Miz at Over the Limit 2011. After failing to capture the WWE title from The Miz at WrestleMania 27, John Cena finally beat him at the following month's Extreme Rules, making this encounter at Over the Limit 2011 their third consecutive pay-per-view bout. This would be their toughest match yet, especially with the I Quit stipulation, but unfortunately, even this wrinkle couldn't generate much excitement once the bell rang. Neither man was in the best place character-wise around this time. Miz was seen as completely out of his depth as a main eventer, whilst this was the absolute peak of Super Cena. Basically, nobody was into this match as a concept, and it still somehow managed to underdeliver. There were no particularly violent or memorable spots, just your standard PG wrestling fare, and while Alex Riley's constant interference made storyline sense, it was still really annoying. Naturally, Cena won the day by overcoming the odds and making Miz quit whilst in the STF. This was, of course, a highly predictable finish to what was a thoroughly underwhelming encounter. Number 19, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Ken Shamrock on Raw. Bret Hart and Bob Backland's match at Mania 11 was so bad that WWE waited over 3 years to try the I Quit stipulation again, and guess what? Their second attempt wasn't great either. It took place on the October 26, 1998 episode of Raw and pitted the corporation's Ken Shamrock against that dastardly little scamp Stone Cold Steve Austin. If Austin and Shamrock had been given a full pay-per-view slot to tear each other apart, then this might have been a decent showing. Unfortunately, this was an Attitude Era match on Raw, so it ended in about 6 minutes thanks to some interference. Mankind snuck into the ring and took Ken out with the mandible claw. Austin then whomped him in the face with a chair, and that was that. Shamrock didn't even say I quit because he was knocked out. I get that the finish was there to protect Shamrock, but maybe this should have been a no DQ match, as it made no effort to play by its own rules in a meaningful way. Number 18, Alberto Del Rio versus Jack Swagger at Extreme Rules 2013. After fighting over the World Heavyweight Championship in one of the least memorable world title matches in WrestleMania history, Alberto Del Rio and Jack Swagger teed off once again at the following month's Extreme Rules. Del Rio had lost the belt to Dolph Ziggler via Money in the Bank cash-in, the only good thing to come out of this wretched feud. The problem here was that the storyline heat between Del Rio and Swagger was nowhere near strong enough to warrant an I Quit motif. Not only was this match underwhelming in the ring, but it was also only given 13 minutes, which is no time at all in I Quit terms. After the All-American American was initially declared the winner through towel-based chicanery, Del Rio came from behind to definitively win the bout. Again, this should have probably been a different stipulation, in a different venue, with different wrestlers. What I'm saying is, this match wasn't very good. Number 17, John Cena versus Rusev at Payback 2015. For 4 straight months in 2015, John Cena feuded with Rusev, the modern-day Miro, over the United States Championship. How many of those matches did the super athlete win? 1. And that wasn't even a clean victory. Oh dear. The Payback pay-per-view saw their rivalry come to an end with I Quit rules in place as the Bulgarian Brute looked to win back the Star-Spangled Belt. There were plenty of decent spots in the match, such as a barricade break and a big explosion in the technical area, but it was the closing sequence that really let this thing down. Trapped in a rope-assisted STF, Rusev began saying words in his native tongue. Cue Lana, Rusev's manager/love interest, hopping on the apron to inform the referee that he was actually saying I quit in Bulgarian. This was done to create tension between the couple, which nobody really wanted to see, and came at the end of a very long and rather sluggish match. At the very least, this rivalry was done, so Rusev and Lana could move on to bigger and better oh god, it's the Dolph Ziggler love triangle angle. Number 16, The Rock vs Triple H on Raw. This I Quit match from the January 25th, 1999 episode of Raw took place just 2 months after the Austin Shamrock debacle. The Rock was the defending world champion looking for a fight and ended up accepting a challenge from Triple H. The great one in the game always had good matches, no matter where they were on the card, but this one was more of an angle than a sporting contest. The in-ring action lasted less than 10 minutes, with no major spots to talk about beyond The Rock hitting a ring bell-assisted people's elbow, which looked like it hurt him more than Trips. Just when it looked like the DX leader was set to win, out came the Corporation. Kane had Chyna in a chokeslam position and was threatening to deliver the move if Trips didn't quit the match. The Cerebral Assassin had to relent and gave Rocky the win. But wait, what's this? Chyna's just turned on Triple H and joined up with the Corporation? What? Like I said, this was more angle than match, but it was a pretty good angle nonetheless. Number 15, Cedric Alexander vs Noam Dar on 205 Live. Yep, there was an I Quit match on 205 Live. WWE were desperate for somebody to actually watch the show, weren't they? The short-lived Cruiserweight exclusive showcase featured several wrestlers who would thankfully have better luck elsewhere, including future tag team champion Cedric Alexander and Meta 4 leader Noam Dar. The pair crossed paths on the July 11th, 2017 episode of the show, looking to end a feud which had begun over the affections of Alicia Fox. Cedric and Noam are both very good wrestlers, but as has been the case throughout most of their WWE runs, they weren't given the right platform. This match only got 11 minutes, which wasn't nearly long enough for the tension to escalate in a meaningful way. Dar finally relented after Alexander kept stomping at his arm with a chair, but this all happened way too quickly for fans to become truly invested in the outcome. Much like 205 Live itself, this match is a great example of what might have been had WWE paid more attention to it. Number 14, Chavo Guerrero vs Rey Mysterio on SmackDown. Only 2 men in WWE history have faced each other in 2 different I Quit matches, and they both happened on unassuming episodes of SmackDown in the mid-2000s. Rey Mysterio's hugely disappointing World Heavyweight Championship reign had ended at the 2006 Great American Bash, thanks in no small part to a betrayal by his old friend Chavo Guerrero. This led to a feud between the 2 men that eventually culminated on the October 20th SmackDown, where the first man to utter those immortal words would be forced to leave the blue brand. They were limited by TV time, only getting 13 minutes to play with, so they had to rush through most of the match until Mysterio quit after being hung upside down and repeatedly struck with a chair. In reality, this was done so Rey could go and get surgery on his injured knee. Number 13, Beth Phoenix vs Melina at One Night Stand 2008. The first all-female I Quit match in WWE history, and just one of 3 to take place in total, happened way sooner than you might expect. At One Night Stand 2008, yes, WWE kept this branding going even after ECW stopped running pay-per-views, Beth Phoenix faced Melina in one of the most heated women's matches in some time. These former friends had fallen out over a series of mishaps, and they made good on the I Quit gimmick too, not holding back one tiny bit. The clash of styles between Phoenix's strength and Melina's flexibility made for some truly excellent wrestling. Melina attempted to tie her opponent up in knots, but eventually fell to a brutal-looking submission that pretty much folded the Scream Queen in half. Unfortunately, as was the way with women's wrestling in WWE at this point, there wasn't nearly enough time devoted to this clash. Number 12, Kaylee Ray vs Toni Storm on NXT UK. 11 years after Phoenix and Melina had their underrated I Quit match, WWE finally decided to put on a second women's version of the stipulation on an episode of NXT UK. NXT UK Women's Champion Kaylee Ray, now known as Alba Fire on the main roster, defended her title against the previous champion, Toni Storm. Despite the extremely low profile of this brand, the 2 competitors went all in on ripping each other to pieces to blow off this heated rivalry. There were plenty of vicious moves, including a huge splash through a table, and Ray was able to get the win by repeatedly Pillmanizing Storm's neck. Maybe this is why she's so crazy these days, eh? Unfortunately, Unfortunately, there was nothing really special at play here, just a harder hitting version of a normal match, and it was only given 13 minutes, and the fans reacted to it like they were watching somebody microwave pasta. Number 11, Jeff Hardy versus Matt Hardy at Backlash 2009. At WrestleMania 25, for just the second time in history, two legit brothers went one-on-one as Matt Hardy defeated Jeff Hardy in no DQ action. 1 month later, Team Extreme collided again under I Quit rules, with Jeff looking to get his win back. Considering this was WWE, where Matt was often treated like something they'd found on the bottom of their shoe, Jeff's win was basically guaranteed. The Backlash match was pretty darn good, way better than what they had produced at Mania. More plunder was involved, which is always a good thing with the Hardys, as the brothers fought each other in a way that only brothers can, without an arrest being made. In an ending straight out of a Saturday morning cartoon, Jeff tied Matt to a table and threatened to hit a ladder vaulting leg drop on him if he didn't quit. After trying to talk the Daredevil down, Matt eventually relented, handing the win to brother Nero. Jeff then hit the move anyway, because younger siblings are the worst. It didn't blow anyone away or anything, but this Hardy derby was good for what it was. Number 10, Rey Mysterio versus Chavo Guerrero on SmackDown. After being clobbered into submission the year before, Rey Mysterio returned at the 2007 SummerSlam to get his revenge on Chavo Guerrero. However, for the man in the mask, this wasn't enough. Rey and Chavo were booked in another I Quit match just a few weeks later on the September 7th episode of SmackDown. If the two Lucha legends could draw on their history from the past year, they stood a good chance of improving on the previous match. Luckily for all involved, that's exactly what they did. In a great callback to the match in 06, Rey won after trapping Chavo in exactly the same position he had been a year earlier, smacking him repeatedly in the knee until Chavito was forced to give up. Number 9, Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania Backlash 2022. Charlotte Flair had retained the SmackDown Women's Championship over Ronda Rousey in an underwhelming bout at WrestleMania 38, which set up this encounter 1 month later. This feud was about as popular as a cockroach in a kitchen at the time, but the two women managed to win the crowd round once the fight got going. They just didn't hold back, leathering each other with kendo sticks and chair shots before brawling into the crowd like a 14-year-old who had just learned how to play SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. Flair also threw a TV camera at Rousey, which I'm fairly certain invalidated its warranty. After the Queen wished Rowdy Ronda a happy Mother's Day in the most unintentionally funny thing to ever happen in an I Quit match, Rousey got Flair in an armbar through a chair to force her to say uncle. I think we can all agree that this match was much better than it should have been, which was a huge relief. Number 8, John Cena versus Batista at Over the Limit 2010. In what would be his final WWE match before he went off to do movies, I wonder how that turned out, the Animal Batista faced off against WWE Champion John Cena at 2010's Over the Limit. After the pair had faced off in a last man standing match the month before, I Quit was a perfectly logical escalation of this feud. It felt like a big time match with big time stars in it, and sure enough, there were plenty of memorable moments to go along with this feeling. Batista hit Cena so hard that the match had to be paused so medics could tend to his wound. He then tried to run his future Hollywood cohort over with a car, which might have won him the title, but would also have definitely got him 10 to 15 years in prison. Cena turned the tide and got Big Dave in an attitude adjustment position on the top of the vehicle. Batista was forced to quit to avoid getting sent to his doom, but Cena hit the move anyway because he's such a great babyface hero. Number 7, Finn Balor versus Edge at Extreme Rules 2022. Finn Balor and Edge had been building their rivalry ever since the Irishman helped kick the Canadian out of the Judgment Day. At 29 minutes and 39 seconds, this is the longest I Quit match WWE have ever done. It may be dragged a little in places, I mean it is a modern Edge match after all, kidding, but on the whole there was plenty of action to sustain such a chunky runtime. It wasn't just grappling and weapon shots either, as the two fighters' various allies ran in to help. Balor had backup from Rhea Ripley, Damian Priest and Dominic Mysterio, whilst Edge was helped out by Beth Phoenix, his semi-retired wife. That doesn't seem massively fair actually, does it? Anyway, the Glamazon would eventually cost her hubby the win, as he was forced to quit to save her from a concerto. A dramatic end to a dramatic match, the rated R superstar and the Demon Prince did very well here, even if this would be the only win Finn would get during this entire feud. Number 6, Randy Orton versus John Cena at Breaking Point 2009. Randy Orton and John Cena have faced each other approximately 5 5 bajillion times in their careers, so it's not surprising that they've had an I Quit match at some point. Breaking Point 2009 was a show built around superstars pushing each other to their limits, so this sort of match fit perfectly. Orton's WWE Championship was on the line, which is also a bonus, and the unique objective of the gimmick meant that the two wrestlers had to change up the formula from their previous bouts. Spilling out across the ringside area, this battle had a proper sense of desperation to it, as each man went to increasingly more drastic lengths to get the win. The Viper thought he had gained the advantage when he handcuffed Cena to the bottom rope, but Big Match John powered up and hit him with an AA anyway. Cena would turn Orton's plan against him when he used the handcuffs to apply a gnarly STF. The champion just couldn't take it, and Johnny Boy was the winner of one of the pair's best ever matches together. Number 5. Cody Rhodes vs AJ Styles at Clash at the Castle, Scotland. These two had thrilled in the main event of Backlash a month beforehand, and there was every expectation that they would match, if not better, that effort in Glasgow now that they had a tasty stipulation to play with. Things started off hot, with the American Nightmare going right on the attack and taking the fight to ringside, then through the crowd and backstage before re-emerging as he refused to give the Phenomenal One a second to catch his breath. A figure 4 didn't compel Styles to utter the key phrase, with Cody and AJ then tumbling over the top rope via a nasty suplex as Styles took control and busted the champ open. Rhodes kept fighting back as they traded big moves and brought out the plunder, with AJ trying to crush his opponent's throat with a steel chair before putting him in handcuffs and beating the living hell out of him with a kendo stick. That was enough for Mama Rhodes sitting at ringside, who slapped the shoulder and then the face that runs the place as Rhodes rallied and put Styles through a table. From there, it was payback time, and AJ ultimately threw up the white flag when Cody threatened to brain him with the steel steps. And then did so anyway. Lol. There may not have been much drama with regards to the end result. Cody was obviously gonna win, but there was plenty of hatred and glorious violence to more than make up for it. Number 4, Roman Reigns vs Jay Uso at Hell in a Cell 2020. I Quit was the perfect story beat for the early days of Roman Reigns' feud with Jay Uso, which was based around the tag team specialist refusing to acknowledge his tribal chief. At Hell in a Cell 2020, Roman and Jay battled inside the titular structure, which was the only real downside to this match. They just didn't make that much use of the cell, making it feel more like an obligation than part of the story, but as for everything else, it was mint. Jay refused to bow to Roman's demands, even though the big dog was in charge for most of the bout. This led to an all-time great ending, which saw Reigns turn his ire towards Jay's brother Jimmy instead. The head of the table locked the other Uso twin in the dreaded guillotine choke, with Jay powerless to stop him. He eventually had to say I quit, but not because he couldn't take it anymore, but because he had to save his family. Oh, and the Universal Championship was on the line too, but that doesn't really matter here, does it? Number 3, Ric Flair vs Mick Foley at SummerSlam 2006. Though they're chummy with each other now, there was a period of time where Ric Flair and Mick Foley legitimately could not stand one another. In the late 90s and early 2000s, they both slung mud in each other's direction, and their real-life beef eventually got turned into a storyline. This can go one of two ways in wrestling, and thankfully this turned out to be a smart move. With a combined age of 98 years old, that's not even a joke, Foley and Flair put on one of the bloodiest I Quit matches ever at SummerSlam 2006. All of the classic Foley toys came out to play. Thumbtacks, baseball bats, barbed wire, you name it, it was there, and it was probably sticking out of one of these two guys by the end of the match. After a hell of a beating by the man, the referee finally ruled Foley unable to compete, but Flair continued his onslaught anyway. Distraught, Melina, Foley's buddy, threw in the towel on his behalf. Finally, just when it looked like Flair was about to strike Melina with the barbed wire bat, Foley relented and gave in, saving his pal from a rather spiky situation. Number 2, Mankind vs The Rock at Royal Rumble 1999. The first episode of Raw from 1999 famously saw Mankind defeat The Rock to win the World Championship in a match that most definitely put butts in seats. This set up a rematch for the Royal Rumble, Foley vs Rocky, I Quit. it. The Brahma Bull brutalized poor Mick in this bout, striking him 11 times in the head with a steel chair, whilst Foley's hands were tied behind his back. I wish this was the only punishment he took on this night, but he was also put through the announce table, DDT'd onto the floor, and chucked off a ladder through some electrical boxes. After all that, Rock still had to cheat by playing a recording of Foley saying he quit to win the match and the title. Even with such a screwy but creative finish, this is a truly unforgettable match, which is ironic when you think about the amount of head trauma it likely caused. Number 1, John Cena vs JBL at Judgment Day 2005. Nobody would ever describe John Cena as being a hardcore wrestler, which is why seeing what happened to him at Judgment Day 2005 is just so insane. The Peacemaker was defending his WWE Championship against JBL, and things looked to be going smoothly until the champ got hit in the head with a chair. Cue one of the goriest blade jobs in WWE history, as Cena spent the rest of the match gushing blood faster than he spit hot fire. While Cena's disgusting red face is the image everybody remembers from this match, the rest of it was also fantastic. It legitimately felt like these two were trying to murder one another, especially with JBL's mean bastard character at the time. The young champion fought through the torment to force his opponent to quit after threatening to hit him with a semi-truck's exhaust pipe. When it comes to I Quit matches, feeling a level above any other hardcore stipulation, this is the best you are going to get. No wonder Cena spent the decade after making poop jokes and selling brightly coloured t-shirts, eh?